After she said, "You're not my future," I disappeared. Now she's flooding my inbox, but her mom's setting me up with someone she'll hate most. I never imagined someone could look me in the eye and call me insufficient while I was literally funding their entire existence. But that's exactly what happened with Hazel, and honestly, it was the wake-up call I needed. I met Hazel 15 months ago at a gallery opening in Soho. She was standing in front of this abstract piece, explaining color theory to anyone within earshot, wearing a dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. I was immediately drawn to her confidence, the way she commanded attention without seeming to try. When she mentioned she worked in marketing for a boutique agency, I figured she had her life together. I was making solid money as an investment banker, had my own place in Manhattan, and was looking for someone who matched my ambition. Hazel seemed perfect. She talked about launching her own jewelry line, had all these creative ideas, and I loved the idea of supporting someone's entrepreneurial dreams. What I didn't realize was that supporting would become completely funding while getting nothing in return except criticism about my lack of artistic vision. The first few months were incredible. Hazel was charming, sophisticated, always knew the best restaurants and galleries. She'd suggest these amazing weekend trips to the Hamptons or day trips to art museums, and I was happy to cover the expenses because she was between commission checks or saving up for her business launch. I thought I was being generous and supportive. Looking back, I was being systematically exploited. By month 6, Hazel had quit her marketing job to focus on her jewelry line full-time. She needed to take a creative sabbatical to properly develop her vision. I supported the decision because I believed in her talent and wanted to help her succeed. That's when the financial requests became a daily occurrence. Her Manhattan apartment rent was $2,800 monthly, and somehow my contribution became essential for her maintaining the right image for her business. Then there were the organic groceries she needed for her creative energy, the BMW lease payments for client meetings, and the designer shopping sprees for research and inspiration. I was essentially covering her entire lifestyle while she pursued what I thought were legitimate business ventures. The breaking point came last month during what was supposed to be our romantic weekend skiing trip to Aspen. I'd spent weeks planning every detail, booked us a luxury lodge, arranged private lessons, made reservations at the best restaurants. The total cost was approaching $4,000, but I wanted to create something special for us. On Friday afternoon, just as I'm leaving the office to pick her up for our flight, my phone rings. "Drew, baby, there's a tiny problem," Hazel said, her voice having that particular tone she used when she needed money. "My credit card got declined at Bergdorf's, and I'm trying to get the perfect après-ski outfits for this weekend. Could you just cover the $1,200 real quick? I'll totally pay you back." I'm standing in the lobby of my building, ski gear already loaded in my car, while she's shopping for luxury clothes for a trip I'm already paying for entirely. The absurdity hit me like a physical force. This wasn't partnership. This wasn't even friendship. This was economic parasitism disguised as romance. But I sent the money because I didn't want to ruin our weekend, and honestly, I was still hoping things would change once her business took off. The weekend itself was beautiful. Hazel looked stunning in her new outfits, was charming with the other guests, posted gorgeous photos that made us look like the perfect couple. But every meal, every drink, every activity was on my card while she documented our adventures for her Instagram followers. When we got back to the city, I started keeping track of expenses for the first time. The numbers were staggering. In 10 months, I'd transferred over $18,000 directly to Hazel, plus covered countless dinners, vacations, and entertainment expenses. I was basically subsidizing another adult's entire existence while receiving nothing in return except the privilege of her company. That's when I knew I had to have a serious conversation about our future and what I needed from a real partnership. I spent the next week conducting what I called my portfolio analysis of our relationship, approaching it with the same methodical precision I used for client investments. The spreadsheet I created was both illuminating and devastating. 10 months of unilateral financial contributions totaling $18,247, broken down by category: rent assistance, groceries, transportation, entertainment, travel, and what Hazel euphemistically called business development expenses. Not once had she contributed to a vacation, picked up a dinner check, or even offered to split utilities during her frequent stays at my penthouse. I was essentially running a one-person charity organization with a single beneficiary who'd never expressed gratitude. The irony wasn't lost on me that I spent my days analyzing investment opportunities for clients while completely failing to recognize that my personal relationship had become a series of bad loans with no collateral and no repayment schedule. Every financial decision Hazel made assumed my continued funding, from her apartment lease renewal to her subscription boxes for creative inspiration materials. She'd constructed her entire lifestyle around my income without ever discussing it or acknowledging the dependency. When my promotion to managing director came through with a substantial bonus package, I wanted to celebrate with the people who mattered most. I arranged dinner at Daniel, invited my closest colleagues, and looked forward to sharing this career milestone with Hazel. Instead, she monopolized the entire evening unveiling her latest venture idea, a sustainable fashion startup that would require significant capital investment to launch properly. While my colleagues tried to congratulate me on years of hard work paying off, Hazel dominated every conversation with detailed financial projections for her imaginary business empire. "Drew's promotion is perfect timing," she announced to the table, completely oblivious to how tone-deaf this sounded. "His increased compensation means we can finally fund the fashion show booth rental and initial inventory production. I've been waiting for the right moment to scale up, and this bonus creates the perfect opportunity." The stunned silence that followed was excruciating. My colleague James actually choked on his wine, while Sarah exchanged uncomfortable glances with her husband. Hazel continued, apparently interpreting their shock as fascination rather than horror. "Investment banking is really just moving money around," she explained to these people who'd watched me work 80-hour weeks for years, "but fashion is about creating something meaningful that transforms how people express themselves." She pulled out her phone and started showing photos of concept sketches and fabric samples, talking about our portfolio and our investment strategies that exclusively benefited her theoretical business ventures. The possessive pronouns were particularly galling since she'd never contributed a single dollar to any shared expense, yet somehow my career achievements had become our financial foundation for our entrepreneurial future. When James politely asked about her timeline for profitability, Hazel launched into a 20-minute presentation about market positioning and brand differentiation that revealed she'd done zero actual research beyond browsing Pinterest boards. My promotion celebration became her business pitch meeting, with my colleagues serving as unwilling venture capital audience for someone who'd never successfully monetized anything except her relationship with me. The professional embarrassment was crushing. These were people I respected, colleagues who'd supported my advancement, and Hazel was treating them like potential investors in her fantasy startup while dismissing my actual achievement as merely providing her with better funding options. After dinner, when everyone else had escaped as quickly as possible, Hazel was practically vibrating with excitement about her presentation. "I think James seemed really interested in the sustainability angle," she said, completely misreading his polite horror as genuine enthusiasm. And Sarah was taking notes when I explained the target demographic analysis. I realized then that Hazel genuinely believed she was my business partner rather than my romantic partner. In her mind, my career existed to generate capital for her ventures, my income represented our shared resources, and my colleagues were networking opportunities for her entrepreneurial ambitions. She'd never seen me as Drew the person, only Drew the funding mechanism. The relationship had become a startup where she was the visionary founder and I was the silent partner providing all the capital with no equity stake and no decision-making authority. I decided to perform due diligence on our relationship the same way I'd evaluate any major investment decision. The comprehensive financial audit revealed exactly what I suspected: over $18,000 invested in 10 months with zero return and no realistic repayment strategy. The itemized breakdown was staggering: apartment assistance, gourmet groceries, luxury dinners, Hamptons weekends, and her perpetual business emergencies that mysteriously coincided with Nordstrom sample sales. Every expense category showed the same pattern: Hazel identifying a need, me providing the funding, and her treating my contribution as an expected service rather than a generous gesture. I'd been operating like her personal venture capital firm while she treated our relationship like a limitless credit line with no interest charges. The final meeting took place at Balthazar, the wine bar where she developed a $15 cocktail habit that I'd been unconsciously subsidizing for months. I chose the location deliberately, somewhere public where she couldn't create a dramatic scene, but familiar enough that she'd feel comfortable speaking honestly. When I arrived, Hazel was already there, scrolling through her phone with a glass of that expensive Sancerre she'd acquired a taste for on my dime. She looked beautiful as always, perfectly styled in a way that probably cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget. "Drew, thank God you're here," she said, barely looking up from her screen. "I've been reviewing the numbers for the fashion show booth, and if we commit to the premium package, the networking opportunities could be incredible." River mentioned that his blockchain startup is looking for strategic partnerships, and sustainable fashion plus cryptocurrency could be the perfect convergence. River. That was a new name, and the casual way she mentioned him suggested this wasn't their first conversation about strategic partnerships. I ordered a beer and sat down, watching her continue typing while she talked. "I know the initial investment seems substantial," she continued, finally making eye contact, "but you understand better than anyone that significant returns require calculated risks. This could be the breakthrough moment where everything changes for us. For us. Always us when it came to my money funding her dreams. "Hazel, we need to talk about our relationship," I said, cutting through her business presentation. Her expression shifted slightly, but she maintained that confident smile she used when negotiating. "I've been thinking about that too," she said. "While I really value our connection, I'm starting to realize that I need someone who truly shares my entrepreneurial passion. Someone who understands the creative process and isn't so focused on traditional corporate structures." The irony was breathtaking. She was breaking up with me for being too corporate while sitting in a restaurant I was about to pay for, wearing clothes I'd indirectly funded, discussing business ventures that existed only because of my corporate salary. "You're an amazing guy, Drew, but we want different things," she continued, her voice taking on that gentle but firm tone people use when delivering devastating news. "I need a partner who gets excited about innovation and disruption, not someone who thinks in spreadsheets and quarterly reports." I almost laughed. She was criticizing my analytical mindset while her entire lifestyle depended on the income generated by that same analytical approach. "What about the money?" I asked directly. "The $18,000 I've contributed over the past 10 months? Hazel looked genuinely confused, like I'd brought up an irrelevant technicality. "Those were partnership expenses," she said slowly, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "We were building something together. Those weren't loans, Drew, they were joint investments in our shared vision." Joint investments. In her mind, she'd somehow convinced herself that my unilateral financial support represented collaborative business development rather than relationship contribution. "I'd hate to lose our friendship," she continued, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "You're such a reliable resource, and I'd regret losing that support system while I explore my options with River. He operates from a much more creative space, understands the importance of thinking beyond traditional paradigms." She wanted to maintain our friendship because I was a reliable resource. Not because she valued me as a person, but because she'd regret losing her financial safety net while she explored romantic options with someone whose trust fund could provide better funding opportunities. The delusion was complete. Hazel had crafted an elaborate mental framework where my financial support constituted voluntary business investment rather than relationship contribution, where my career existed to fund her ventures, and where our breakup should somehow maintain my financial obligations while she pursued other partners. I executed a complete financial divestment the next morning, approaching it with the same systematic precision I'd use for liquidating a failing portfolio. First, I terminated all shared subscriptions, streaming services, meal delivery apps, the premium gym membership she'd been using. Then I removed her from my investment property insurance as an additional resident and canceled the credit card I'd added her to for emergency expenses that somehow always involved luxury purchases. Finally, I blocked her number, email, and all social media accounts, creating a complete communication firewall. The silence was immediate and profound, like stepping out of a noisy restaurant into fresh air. For the first time in months, I wasn't constantly monitoring my phone for Venmo requests or checking my accounts for unauthorized charges. My mental bandwidth, previously occupied by calculating Hazel's financial needs, suddenly became available for focusing on my own goals and interests. The peace lasted exactly 4 days. Tyler, our mutual friend who'd introduced us, started forwarding me increasingly panicked messages from Hazel when she realized her primary funding source had vanished. "Drew, this is ridiculous. You can't just disappear when we have obligations to discuss," read the first message Tyler showed me. By day 3, the tone had shifted dramatically. "My rent notice came today and apparently you were covering more than I realized. This is breach of contract behavior." Breach of contract. She'd convinced herself that our relationship constituted a binding financial agreement where I was legally obligated to fund her lifestyle indefinitely. The entitlement was staggering, but somehow perfectly consistent with someone who'd never contributed to a single shared expense while expecting unlimited access to my income. Tyler was clearly uncomfortable serving as intermediary for what had become Hazel's collection agency operation. "Dude, she's asking me to explain your contractual obligation to fund her Fashion Week showcase," he told me over coffee. "She keeps saying you committed to supporting her entrepreneurial journey and can't just breach your agreement mid-development." I pulled out my phone and forwarded Tyler the detailed expense reports I'd compiled, every transfer, every payment, every instance of financial support over 10 months. The documentation painted a clear picture of who'd actually been fulfilling their obligations and who'd been exploiting someone else's generosity. "Holy shit," Tyler said, scrolling through the records. "I had no idea the numbers were this extreme. She's been telling everyone you were partners in her business ventures." The financial evidence spoke for itself. $18,000 in unilateral support with zero reciprocation, zero appreciation, and zero acknowledgement that she was living entirely off my income. Tyler forwarded the expense reports to Hazel without comment, and the resulting silence provided me with unprecedented tranquility. No more guilt trips about her upcoming fashion show. No more emotional manipulation about abandoning her during crucial development phases. No more responsibility for funding someone else's fantasy lifestyle while being criticized for my lack of artistic vision. For the first time since meeting Hazel, I was able to focus entirely on my own financial goals. I maxed out my retirement contributions, opened a separate investment account, and started researching properties in neighborhoods I actually wanted to live in rather than locations chosen to enhance Hazel's Instagram aesthetic. The money I'd been hemorrhaging to support her delusions could now build my own future, fund my own interests, and serve my own ambitions. Within 2 weeks, I'd saved more money than I had in the previous 6 months combined. The psychological relief was even more significant than the financial benefit. I no longer felt like a human ATM constantly calculating whether I could afford someone else's lifestyle choices. My relationship with money returned to normal. It became a tool for building my future rather than a weapon someone else used to manipulate my emotions. When friends asked about the breakup, I kept the explanation simple. We wanted different things and had incompatible approaches to partnership. I didn't need to elaborate on the financial exploitation or her delusional sense of entitlement. The documentation I'd created served as a private reminder that I'd been generous to a fault with someone who'd mistaken kindness for weakness and support for stupidity. 4 months into my strategic withdrawal from the Hazel investment debacle, I discovered what authentic partnership actually looked like through the most unexpected source: her own family. Lily Chen worked as a veterinary surgeon at the Animal Medical Center, made excellent money in her own right, and had been quietly witnessing her cousin's financial exploitation with growing concern. When she approached me at the Metropolitan Museum's annual charity gala, I initially assumed she was there to advocate for Hazel or deliver some family guilt trip about my sudden disappearance. Instead, she opened with an apology that completely caught me off guard. "I owe you a sincere apology for my cousin's behavior," Lily said, looking genuinely embarrassed. "Our family has been concerned about Hazel's pattern of monetizing relationships for years, but we never knew the extent of her financial exploitation until recently. What she did to you was predatory and completely unacceptable. The directness was refreshing after months of Hazel's manipulative communication style. Lily didn't make excuses or try to rationalize her cousin's behavior. She simply acknowledged the reality that Hazel had systematically exploited my generosity while contributing nothing meaningful to our relationship. I've been wanting to reach out because I think you deserve to know that not everyone in our family supported her approach to relationships, she continued. Some of us actually have principles about financial responsibility and mutual contribution. When I suggested we continue the conversation over dinner, Lily's response revealed everything I'd been missing with Hazel. She insisted on reviewing the restaurant's menu online first, calculated exactly what she planned to order, and brought cash to cover her portion plus tax and tip. The wine pairing menu cost $85 per person, and she meticulously counted out her share without making it seem like a political statement or financial hardship. This wasn't someone performing equality for show. This was someone who genuinely believed in proportional contribution as a fundamental relationship principle. I've seen what Hazel does to people, Lily explained over dinner, discussing her cousin with the clinical detachment of someone who'd studied this behavior pattern extensively. She identifies generous, successful men and systematically exploits their kindness until they either go broke or wise up and leave. You're actually the first one who figured it out before she completely drained your savings account. The conversation revealed that Hazel's financial parasitism wasn't opportunistic behavior, it was a calculated strategy she'd perfected over multiple relationships. Lily shared family stories about previous boyfriends who'd funded Hazel's graduate school tuition, vacation packages, and various business ventures that never materialized beyond initial investment phases. Our Aunt Margaret has been keeping track of the damage, Lily said, showing me screenshots of family group messages. She estimates Hazel has extracted over $60,000 from various relationships without ever contributing anything meaningful in return. The family is actually relieved that you escaped before she convinced you to co-sign loans or make major property investments. Meanwhile, Hazel's increasingly desperate communications were arriving through mutual friends, revealing that her relationship with River had imploded spectacularly. Apparently, the blockchain developer expected proportional financial contribution to their innovative partnership, a concept that completely bewildered someone accustomed to unilateral support. Tyler forwarded me screenshots of Hazel's panicked messages about River's unreasonable expectations regarding shared expenses and his shocking demand that she contribute to their vacation costs. She keeps asking if this is normal behavior, Tyler reported with obvious amusement. Apparently, River expects her to pay for her own groceries and split restaurant bills, which she considers financially abusive. The irony was perfect. Hazel had abandoned me for someone who understood innovation and disruption, only to discover that he also understood the basic concept of proportional contribution. Her delusions about finding a partner who'd fund her lifestyle while appreciating her artistic vision had collided with the reality that successful people generally expect mutual investment in relationships. Lily's family had been watching this development with satisfaction, particularly her Aunt Margaret, who'd never approved of Hazel's approach to relationships. Aunt Margaret actually asked about you last week, Lily mentioned during our third date. She said she'd always liked that responsible Drew fellow and wondered if you'd learned your lesson about supporting deadweight family members. The market exposure came at Tyler's gallery opening 3 months later, where Hazel encountered Lily and me together for the first time since I'd begun dating someone who actually understood financial reciprocity. I'd been looking forward to this event because Tyler was showcasing emerging artists, and Lily had genuine enthusiasm for supporting creative talent through actual purchases rather than theoretical appreciation. We'd already identified 2 pieces we wanted to buy together, splitting the cost equally because that's how normal partnerships function. Hazel arrived fashionably late, wearing what appeared to be a new dress that definitely exceeded her current financial capacity, scanning the room like she was evaluating networking opportunities rather than appreciating art. When she spotted me, her expression shifted through surprise, calculation, and something that looked like territorial panic. Her gaze immediately locked onto Lily, specifically the vintage Cartier bracelet she wore. identical to pieces Hazel had shown me on her Pinterest board with heavy hints about birthday gifts and investment jewelry. The recognition was instant and devastating. Here was someone wearing the exact luxury accessories Hazel had suggested I should purchase for her, except Lily had bought this piece herself with her own surgical income. The cognitive dissonance was visible on Hazel's face as she processed that another woman was effortlessly wearing what she'd considered symbols of a man's commitment and financial devotion. "Drew, what a lovely surprise," Hazel said, approaching us with that practiced smile she used for networking events. "And you must be the new girlfriend Tyler mentioned." Her tone carried just enough edge to signal possession while maintaining plausible social acceptability. "This is Lily," I said, putting my arm around someone who'd never once made me feel like a human A-team. "Lily, this is Hazel, my ex-girlfriend." "Nice to finally meet you," Lily said with genuine warmth, extending her hand. "Drew's mentioned you, and I've heard wonderful things about your creative ventures." The grace in Lily's response highlighted everything Hazel lacked: authentic confidence that didn't require putting others down, professional success that didn't depend on exploitation, and social skills that created connection rather than competition. When Tyler approached to discuss the evening's sales, Lily graciously accepted his dinner invitation for next week but immediately mentioned she'd handle the theater tickets since he was covering the restaurant. This casual demonstration of reciprocal planning visibly stunned Hazel, who'd never once offered to contribute to any shared activity during our entire relationship. The concept of voluntarily assuming financial responsibility seemed to confuse her as much as River's expectation that she pay for her own groceries. "Excuse me," Hazel said, pulling me aside with urgent determination. "We need to talk privately." She led me toward the gallery's quieter back section, away from Lily's hearing range. "This is absolutely insane, Drew. We have 3 years of history together. What does she have that I don't? This is obviously some kind of rebound situation. Lily has her own career, pays her own bills, and treats me like an equal partner rather than a funding source," I replied, watching Hazel's face process this foreign concept. "She also insisted on splitting the cost of those 2 paintings we just bought, which is something you never did in 15 months together." "This is about money again?" Hazel's voice rose slightly. "I told you I was willing to change, to contribute more to our relationship." When did you tell me that?" "During our last conversation, when I explained that I'd learned my lesson and wanted to work things out." I had no memory of any such conversation, probably because it had never happened. Hazel was rewriting history to support her current narrative, a skill she'd perfected throughout our relationship. "Look," she said, switching to vulnerability mode, "I know I made mistakes, but River taught me the importance of appreciating what you have. I understand now what you meant to me, and I'm ready to be the partner you deserve." The timing was perfect. Hazel's declaration of personal growth coincided exactly with her financial crisis and failed backup relationship, proving that her revelations about my value were entirely circumstantial rather than genuine. When I introduced Lily to my colleagues as my partner who maintains complete financial independence, the pointed distinction visibly rattled Hazel, who'd never heard me describe anyone in terms of their self-sufficiency. The phrase represented everything she'd failed to embody: autonomy, responsibility, and the ability to contribute rather than consume. Hazel's final desperate campaign arrived in the form of dissertation-length messages about personal growth and recognizing my true value, delivered with perfect timing as Lily and I announced our engagement following 8 months of genuinely equitable partnership. The irony wasn't lost on me that Hazel's sudden appreciation for my worth coincided exactly with her complete financial collapse and social isolation. Rather than deleting these communications like I had with her previous attempts at reconciliation, I decided to forward them to someone who'd been watching this situation unfold with growing amusement: Lily's Aunt Margaret. Margaret's response arrived within hours, accompanied by screenshots that revealed the full scope of her family's strategic thinking. "Drew, I've been hoping you'd reconnect with our family for months," she wrote. "These screenshots show our group chat discussions about introducing you to Lily dating back to last winter. We've all been relieved about your escape from Hazel's financial predation and hoping you'd find someone who shares your values regarding fiscal responsibility and mutual investment." The family group messages were revelatory. Margaret had been advocating for months that someone should introduce me to Lily, describing me as that responsible banker fellow who deserves better than being someone's personal ATM. The screenshots showed ongoing discussions about Hazel's pattern of exploiting generous men and their collective hope that I'd realize my worth before she convinced me to make major financial commitments like co-signing loans or joint property investments. We actually had a family intervention about Hazel's behavior, Margaret explained during our engagement dinner. Everyone agreed that she was following the same playbook she'd used with previous boyfriends: identify someone generous and successful, exploit their kindness systematically, then move on when they either went broke or developed boundaries. You were just the first one smart enough to document everything and cut your losses strategically. The documentation I'd created had served multiple purposes beyond personal clarity. When Margaret shared my expense reports with the extended family, it provided concrete evidence of Hazel's financial parasitism and validated their concerns about her character. The numbers spoke louder than any family drama or interpersonal speculation. $18,000 extracted without reciprocation proved that their instincts about Hazel's exploitative nature had been absolutely correct. Hazel's ultimate confrontation attempt unfolded at the Union Square Farmers Market, where Lily and I had developed a Saturday morning routine of buying ingredients for meals we'd cook together. The domestic normalcy of grocery shopping as equal partners represented everything Hazel had never understood about authentic relationships: shared responsibilities, proportional contributions, and genuine collaboration rather than unilateral exploitation. She materialized near the organic produce stands like some kind of financial ghost, looking haggard in a way that suggested her lifestyle adjustments had been more dramatic than anticipated. "Drew, please, just give me 5 minutes," she said, positioning herself between us and the artisanal bread vendor. "I know you're angry, but my experience with River taught me everything I needed to know about the importance of genuine partnership." The public setting was clearly calculated to minimize my ability to respond harshly, but it also provided witnesses to what would become Hazel's final humiliation. "River showed me how selfish I'd been," she continued, apparently unaware that Lily was calmly selecting sourdough while I handled our shared grocery budget. "I understand now that relationships require mutual investment and equal contribution. I was young and naive before, but I've learned what real partnership means." The irony was staggering. She was delivering a speech about mutual investment while Lily and I demonstrated authentic financial collaboration 3 feet away. "I've been thinking about us constantly," Hazel said, her voice starting to crack with genuine desperation. "About what we built together, about the future we planned. I know I can be the partner you deserve now because I understand what I lost." What we built together? The delusion remained intact. She still believed our relationship had been collaborative rather than parasitic, still convinced herself that my unilateral financial support represented joint investment in shared dreams. "Hazel," I said quietly, "you're seeing what genuine partnership looks like right now." I gestured toward Lily, who was negotiating with the cheese vendor while I organized our reusable shopping bags. "She just bought breakfast while I'm handling our car insurance payment. This is what equal contribution actually means." The breakdown was immediate and public. Hazel's carefully constructed narrative about learning and growing collapsed as she witnessed authentic financial equality in action. Her sobs echoed across the farmer's market as other shoppers politely avoided eye contact, leaving her to confront the consequences of treating romance like a venture capital opportunity where she'd contributed nothing but demanded maximum returns. Lily and I finished our shopping and walked away together, our relationship built on legitimate equality rather than economic exploitation, leaving Hazel among the organic vegetables to finally understand the difference between partnership and parasitism.